Imagine waking up to the sound of jets over your capital, not during a war, not after an election, but on an ordinary night. At around 2 in the morning, Caracas shook, windows rattled, power flickered, phones lit up at once, and by sunrise, something unthinkable had happened. The president of Venezuela was gone, not resigned, not overthrown by a rival, taken, flown out of the country, and now sitting in a courtroom in the United States. For years, Nicolas Maduro was treated as untouchable, sanctioned, isolated, criticized, but still in power, until suddenly he wasn't. And that raises a much bigger question. What actually happened to Venezuela? And what happens next? Because this story isn't just about one man. It's about oil, power, scarcity, and what happens when a country with everything ends up with nothing. Venezuela should be one of the richest countries on Earth. It sits on the largest proven oil reserves in the world, more than Saudi Arabia, more than Russia, more than the United States. For decades, oil paid for everything: schools, hospitals, subsidies, a middle class that believed the good times would never end. And then, the money stopped working. Prices doubled, then tripled, then stopped meaning anything at all. At the peak of hyperinflation, prices were changing hourly. People were paid in cash they couldn't carry. Savings became confetti. Doctors performed surgeries without anesthesia. Families skipped meals. Children fainted in classrooms. More than 7 million Venezuelans left the country, one of the largest migrations in modern history. This didn't happen overnight. It happened step by step. And to understand what comes next, you have to understand how Venezuela broke in the first place. It starts with oil. Oil is simple in theory. You pump it, you sell it, you get rich. But in practice, oil is fragile. It requires expertise, maintenance, foreign investment, and long-term planning. Venezuela slowly lost all four. After years of politicizing the oil industry, skilled workers left, equipment aged, production collapsed. At its peak, Venezuela produced over 3 million barrels a day. By the 2020s, it was struggling to reach a fraction of that. Then came sanctions. The United States targeted Venezuela's oil exports, financial system, and access to global markets. The logic was pressure, economic pain, force political change. But sanctions don't fall evenly. They land hardest on ordinary people. The economy shrank by nearly 70%. Imagine a country losing nearly 3/4 of its economic output without a war. That's the scale of collapse. And yet, Maduro stayed in power. Elections were disputed, political prisoners were jailed or exiled, institutions hollowed out. Venezuela became frozen in place, too broken to thrive, too entrenched to change, until the night it didn't. In early January 2026, U.S. forces launched a sudden operation inside Venezuela: aircraft, special units, precision strikes. The official language was careful, a law enforcement action, an extradition. But on the ground, it felt like something else entirely. Explosions near government buildings, roadblocks, communications disrupted. By sunrise, Nicolas Maduro and his wife were gone. The United States said this was about justice, drug trafficking, weapons charges. Others called it an invasion. Latin American governments condemned it. Russia and China warned of dangerous precedent. The United Nations urged restraint. Inside Venezuela, confusion reigned. Who was in charge? Would the military splinter? Would loyalists fight back? For a moment, it felt like the country was holding its breath. An interim government stepped in. Political prisoners were released. Public statements promised stability. But stability is fragile when power changes overnight. Armed groups didn't disappear. Fear didn't vanish. Trust didn't magically return. And beneath all of it, the same old problem remained: oil. Here's the uncomfortable math. Even if Venezuela wanted to recover tomorrow, it couldn't do it alone. Its oil infrastructure is damaged, its refineries outdated, its workforce depleted. To restart production at scale requires billions of dollars and years of calm. But investors don't rush into chaos. They wait, or they leave. So while the world talks about Venezuela's potential, the reality is colder. Potential doesn't feed people, production does. And production needs stability, something Venezuela hasn't had in a long time. Meanwhile, the shockwaves spread outward. Cuba, dependent on Venezuelan oil, suddenly faced shortages. Regional energy markets tightened. Great powers quietly repositioned. This wasn't just a Venezuelan crisis anymore. It was a test of sovereignty, of international norms, of how far powerful countries are willing to go when strategic resources are involved. And now comes the hardest part. What happens next? There is no clean ending to this story. If a new government holds elections, will the results be trusted? If sanctions are lifted, will investment return or hesitate? If oil flows again, who controls it? Venezuela has been here before. Moments of hope, followed by disappointment. The tragedy is not that Venezuela lacks resources. It's that it has too much of the one thing everyone wants. Oil made Venezuela rich. Oil made it powerful. And oil may have trapped it in a cycle it still can't escape. The president is gone, but the system that broke the country is still there. And the question facing Venezuela and the world isn't whether things will change. It's whether this time they'll change for the people who stayed, or for the people who left, or for the powers still watching, waiting, and calculating. Because Venezuela's future hasn't been decided yet. It's just been forced open. And what fills that space next will matter far beyond its borders.